Yeah, a biologist says researchers believe that dogs are the descendants of domesticated wolves that were bred to be better companions for humans. It has recently been found that some breeds of dog are much more closely related genetically to wolves than to most other breeds of dog. Interesting. This shows that some dogs are descended from wolves that were domesticated much more recently than others.
Whoa. Okay. New idea there.
Yeah, and that's their conclusion. And you're not allowed to bring up new shit in your conclusion. You know, one red flag on LSAT logical reasoning, whenever they say this shows,
Yep.
what they mean is this proves. And my response is always, no, it doesn't. It just doesn't. I'm willing to give you all your facts, but I'm not going to give you that last conclusion. So my objection here is simply because these dogs are more closely related to wolves than they are to other dogs does not mean that they have to have been domesticated more recently. Why can't they have why can't they be super closely related to wolves, but they were domesticated first? Like, what does domestication have to do with
Time.
how closely you are genetically related?
Yeah. Like the assumption here is that once you were domesticated, then you continued to evolve or something, I guess, or like genetically change, right? Like somehow that's
Which, because of animal husbandry, because we know that we like purposely choose dogs to be different, have different characteristics, then I mean, I guess kind of like my outside knowledge says, well, I mean, probably, but probably isn't good enough on the
and
LSAT.
it's
Probably
just it's a week probably, right? I don't even know if you can go that far. It's like
right,
maybe
right,
because right, like cockroaches or something, haven't they like not evolved hardly at all
yeah.
for the last
Well, yeah.
million, trillion, billion years?
Not only that, but what if I want my dog to be a fucking wolf?
And you keep it that way. Yep.
Yeah,
And you
like what if I
favor, yep.
purposely breed my dogs with wolves to try to get them as much like wolves as I can?
Yeah.
It could be the reason why it's the most like a wolf is because I like wolves and I
Yep.
domesticated, or my great great grandfather domesticated this wolf and then just like kept it as a wolf, basically kept breeding it with wolves, and that's his dog, but it's
Yeah.
like super wolf like because he wants it to be that way.
Yeah.
And that's the biologist seems to be assuming that's not the case with this particular breed of dog.
Yep. Like the more closely genetically related you are to a wolf, the more recently you must have come away from that wolf. Something
Right.
like that.
But that's an assumption of the
It's
argument.
an
That's an
assumption. Yep.
unstated premise of the argument, and that's the weakness of the biologist's argument. If we were 2L or 3L legal writing TAs,
Yeah.
and this was our 1L student with their brief, we would be like, hey, you need to make explicit the piece where if you are more closely related genetically, then that means that you must have been domesticated more recently.
Yep.
You leapt to that conclusion without stating it explicitly as a premise of your argument.
Yeah.
Which one of the following principles underlies the biologist's argument? What type of question do you think that is? It's not a principle question because there ain't no such thing.
No, actually, so this is kind of like a strengthening question slash assumption question. Because if something is underlying the argument, then it's something that is supporting it and is assumed, essentially, right?
I would call it a necessary assumption question or even a must be true question.
Oh, so
I
why would
mean,
you say necessary
because
assumption? Just because I'm worried about
because
the strength of that, right?
because underlies
Means necessarily.
means this is part of the argument,
Okay. I'm cool with
right?
that.
It doesn't say which one of the following, if true, it doesn't say which of the following principles if true or if assumed would
Hmm.
help or justify or strengthen or what. It doesn't say that. So I can't really put it on a strengthen question. It just really seems to me like it's a necessary assumption or a must be true. It's like which one of these does the argument rely on,
Yeah.
right? Which one of these underlies the argument? It underlies, means like it's a foundation.
Yep.
It's like a critical piece of the puzzle here. A says if one breed of dog is descended from wolves that were domesticated more recently than were the wolves from which most other breeds of dog are descended. I really don't need to read the rest of that, do I?
Yeah.
Because it's conditional on the conclusion of the argument.
Yeah.
It's
That's
like if we
backwards.
assume that the dog is descended more recently, then the
Yep.
former breed may be more closely related to wolves than those other breeds are. It's all the right words, but they're arranged in the wrong order.
Yep.
It's like what that does is it says if you already know that the dog is domesticated more recently, then it will be more closely related. No, we want if it's more closely related, then it has to be descended more recently. Yeah.
Yep.
B
Confusing,
says,
sufficient for necessary.
yeah. B says if one breed of dog is more closely related to wolves than to another breed of dog, then the former breed of dog has more recent undomesticated wolf ancestors than the latter breed has.
What do you think?
I like it. I mean, it seems to be the reverse of what A said, right? We thought A was backward, confusing, sufficient for necessary.
Hmm.
B looks like it puts the elements in the right order. The missing, and they did like obfuscate it here a little bit with the former breed of dog has more recent undomesticated wolf ancestors. They could
Mm,
have just said the former breed of dog was domesticated more recently, but they
yeah,
did that on
but
purpose.
yeah,
That's lawyer shit. That's what they're testing.
they're saying the same thing with different words so that people run away. But
Right. But savvy LSAT students will remember that there is one correct answer that makes perfect sense. And so we're going to be super critical of the wrong answers, but the one answer that we pick, we're going to understand how it answers the question perfectly. Even if it's worded in a shitty way, we're going to grind through it to simplify it down, basically. I mean, if you translate B, it says, if you're more closely related to wolves, then you are more recently domesticated.
yeah,
That's what it means in a worse way,
yeah.
but it's still going to be the correct answer here. C says any breed of dog descended from wolves that were domesticated is more
Okay.
closely related genetically to at least some other breeds of dog than to wolves.
This doesn't even have to be true, but um,
It's to me, it's just nonsense, to be honest. I mean, in
yeah,
in in real life, if I was sitting there doing a 35-minute time section, I would give that answer no attention whatsoever. I mean, I read it in 3 seconds. I don't understand it. I do understand B. In an LSAT class, I might take 5 minutes to explain exactly why C is wrong. Like, well, here's what I think it means, and here's what the argument would have to have said in order to make that right. But when I'm actually doing the test, I read that and I go, that doesn't make sense. And I don't pick answers that don't make sense. Next.
yeah. And if all five don't make sense, then fine. You got to double down and figure it out.
And I'm
But
totally comfortable with that too. On some of the
yeah,
questions, I'm going to have to dig in for 3 or 4 minutes and really analyze each answer very carefully. But on the
yeah,
majority of questions, the right answer is going to jump out to me, like B did here. And the
yeah,
wrong answers are going to just be either obviously wrong or they're not going to make sense.
yep,
And I have no patience for answers that don't make sense because 4 out of 5 answers on the LSAT are wrong. And I just expect answers to be bullshit. D says if one breed of dog is more closely related to wolves than another breed of dog is, Now the first half of that makes sense so far, right? That's
That's
like,
good.
okay, you're on target.
Yep, that
Then the
they're
former
closely
breed
related.
of dog is more closely related to wolves than to the latter breed of dog.
Okay, first of all, it
That's
doesn't
also
even
doesn't,
talk
yeah, that
about the
doesn't make sense.
time, right? So it's out, but it's also like if I do follow it, not that we need to, right? Actually, I would just end it here because of the time. It doesn't talk about the time, and so I don't.
Yeah, but also just because you're the breed of dog that's most closely related to wolves, you could still be more closely related to the second
Yeah,
closest breed of
you're two
dog,
degrees away from wolves, but you're only 1 degree away from another dog.
but
So
you're
what?
still the breed of dog that's most closely related to
Yeah.
wolves. So D just doesn't have to be true. I mean, I'm treating this as a necessary assumption question, and the author does not have to agree with that. E says any two breeds of dog that are more closely related to each other than to wolves, which wasn't even contemplated in the facts. I mean, that's just not part of the argument at all. Two breeds of dog that are closely related to each other. That's not what the biologist was even talking about.
Nope. Talking
So
about
we don't,
dogs related to wolves, but anyways, yeah.
it's so, well, so it's so far off that I don't need to read the rest of E. I've
Yeah.
already found an answer that I really like. We predicted it, in fewer words. We predicted something simpler than B, but B means the exact same thing.
Yeah.
I either know that A, C, D, and E, I either know that they're objectively wrong, like A, because it's confusing sufficient for necessary, or I just don't even understand what they say. And that's fine because I do understand how B is a perfect answer. I've looked at all 5 answers. None of them are going to compete with B. So the answer is B.
I do feel like that most people who don't pick B struggle with the phrase that you talked about, which is the more recent undomesticated wolf ancestors. If you have more recent undomesticated wolf ancestors, then that means that the transition from wolf to dog took place more recently, right?
Perfect. Perfect.
Yeah.